everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talk to Me Better, where we have a provocative look into the communication challenges of EU institutions and international organizations, brought to you by Kronos Europa. Welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us. My name is Valériane, and I'm going to be your moderator today. So let me pave the way for you. Did you know that 40% of the world's population is into video games? That's right. Gaming industry has become a colossal industry, surpassing even music and movies in its reach and impact. So video games aren't just about fun and escapism anymore. They're being leveraged for education, social change, and much more. This notion of serious games all started in the 70s with the Microsoft flight simulators, then followed with America's Army or Darfur is Dying. All of those games showed us that blending entertainment with training was possible. So now serious games have broadened their scope even further. In Europe, for example, they're used to tackle mental health issues, teach skills to children, or raise social awareness. And those are very interesting tools for understanding complex issues, fostering empathy, and also communicating with Gen Z, Alpha, and Beta. They're powerful tools in general, and that's what we're going to explore today. So first, we're going to see how serious games influence social behaviors. Then we're going to discuss about the emotional engagement to enhance communications. And then finally, we'll go to the point of coming to strategies and challenges in designing games to fight disinformation and navigate the information age. So we're lucky today to have three speakers around the table who will help us respond to those answers. Céline, hello. Nice to have you with us.
Hello, Valériane, and thank you for having me. So my name is Céline Bras, and I work at the European Parliament. I'm a communication officer there. And more precisely, I'm a project leader for the European Parliament role-play games within the Europa Experience unit. So what does that unit do? We basically are opening visitor centers all over Europe, in all capital cities, to bring European Parliament to the doorsteps of citizens, because not everybody can have the opportunity to go to Brussels or Strasbourg. So it's really centers where they can come and learn about Europe and be hopefully impressed or passionate about everything that the beautiful diversity there is to discover and the important topics that are covered there. And we also want to provide them with an interactive experience through role-play games, whether it's physical or online, but I'm sure we have more time to come back to it later on.
Thank you, Céline. Olivier, hello.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Valériane.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. So I'm Olivier Mauco. I'm from Paris, and I'm CEO of Gaming Society. And there I'm also game director, designing all the games. We are agency dedicated to communication training through games. So the idea is to develop games on different subjects, different matters, serious subjects most of the time, with the field of cultural institutions, even public institutions, but also corporate, for corporate communication or corporate trainings. And there we design the games, we make them, and also we think about how to communicate through them, because we're going to see maybe later in this conversation that you can do something, but you get to promote it, to give the will to play also.
Thank you. And Gerard, last but not least.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm Gerard Mulder. I'm the director and owner of Mindgame, together with my companion. We have 10 young people. We produce games in Amsterdam, basically for large organizations, so from 1,000 to 100,000 people. And I could say it's about corporate communication, but it's more about corporate change. So what we try to do with our game is to help the organization get from A to B, and to make their minds ready to make that move, or to discover early on whether the move is going to be rejected or not, because that's just as important.
Thank you, Gerard. So if I dive directly in our first topic, so about understanding the notion of serious game in the context of social change, how do you define serious games? I mean, how this definition that you have of serious games influence your approach in the game development from scratch?
Yeah, of course, we're not into societal change that much with our projects, but we do definitely look at large organizations as societies in and of themselves. And we have noticed from the clients that come to us that if they are stuck with their change, either two things could be wrong. One is we didn't explain it properly, and the other one is the people are just not ready for it. So games kind of move in the interface of that. Part of the game is, of course, communicating the desired change. But another important part is investigating whether the people are actually willing and able to get there. And if you can do that in a short afternoon, it saves a lot of trouble later down the road. That's basically how we look at games as a facilitator of change. Yeah.
Okay. So is facilitating the change something you really put forward at the beginning of when you start to build a game? Is this something you really tell the client we want to?
Yeah, the good news is that we'll make this more fun. And the bad news is it may not end up where you want it to end up.
Okay.
And if they're willing to accept that, we're willing to make an offer. Because if they're not going to accept that they're looking for a propagandist, then we're not a propagandist. If you give people agency, you have to be willing to accept that they end up in a slightly different place. And that's a very important principle for us.
Facilitators for change, is this also how, Céline, you would describe games in terms of their role within the European Parliament's communication?
I'm not too sure it's really the goal that is changed. The goal is really kind of awareness and understanding, and realizing that democracy is something that speaks to everybody and that should belong to everybody, including people who think that it's far away from them. And it is really how we intend to use the games. And the goal is not necessarily to change their behavior, but more to have them have an active part in the process. The process is really what we look at. And to have actually the players understand that the process of politics, the process of decision-making, the process of compromise, and the fact that democracy is something that you build together on top of each other. So that's really what we are looking at with the games we do.
That's great.
And Olivier, maybe as the founder of Game in Society, but also in your role as a teacher in Sciences Po Paris, what distinguishes serious games from traditional educational tools?
One of the main things is how the information is conveyed. Let's say that in the educational classical tools, it's more top-down. You're here, you listen, sometimes you try to remember things, but it is not by doing. When in games, it's learning by doing, and also we accept losing, we accept failure, and I think learning through failure also is very, very important. So games should be defined also as safe places. We're going to experiment things to see the consequences, to try things, and it's better sometimes to try within game and not in reality. So it's a good place also to learn, to explore, sometimes to go in over direction you didn't expect you could go.
So this is what we could say your design philosophy is, like learning while doing.
Yeah, it's always by doing, by experimenting, and also give some freedom and some possibility to explore. That's very important to have it in mind. As you say, Céline, it's very important because the process, how you learn, the way you acquire content and information is very fundamental. And also, if you think about change, sometimes people say games are producing worldviews, etc. So they can be tools to change the mentalities. But first step, I think games are there to connect. To connect people, to connect to democracy, to Europe, to whatever you want to connect with. It's a good point of entrance. And so that's why it's also our philosophy is first step to, engage something, conversation, pleasure, discussion, and have some pleasant moment with.
Céline, how do you interpret the effectiveness of serious games in the European Parliament? How do you measure the effectiveness of this role-play game that you developed?
So it's for any communication action, unless you go very tailored with a very specific goal, like selling a product, where you can have a direct output of your action. Like I made a big communication or advertising campaign, and then the next month I sell 10% more. That's very easily measurable. For communication of ideas and institutional communication, it's more difficult because the long-term effects are something that is more difficult to measure. Like, okay, we can measure how many people more voted, but our goal is to go for more active citizens, committed citizens who have an interest in democracy. That could be through voting, it could be through many other different actions. I mean, just taking one topic, it's absolutely not the only one, but if you look at Friday for the Future, there were thousands of young people in the street. These are definitely engaged citizens. Whether you're for or against, it's not even the debate, but how do you measure? Was it because they played a game? Was it because they saw an ad? So this is always very, very complicated. We're really aware that it's like a long-term seed you're planting in the hopes that it's actually gonna help democracy be stronger and healthier in the future. How it's going to be measured, though, it's a very complicated question.
I was thinking about the elections. We just had European elections, and then there's a small gamification that probably every country has, and that's you can fill in a query, and it gives you an advice for which party to vote. And I'm calling it a gamification deliberately because you're kind of stepping into it, and you're putting on a different thinking cap than normally, and you think about issues you normally don't think about. And we did it at the lunch table at our company. And all of a sudden, we never talk about politics, but all of a sudden some not controversial political topics were, because it's usually controversial, right? So people tune out if you start a discussion about something. But because those questions were all across the board, you really had a conversation at the table. So it did immediately what you said that it should do. It connected people and it allowed people to communicate. So it's not just about the advice you get at the end, but it's about the process you go through. And it was more fun to do it as a group than to do it alone. And I think those simple things are you probably where gamification is changing society a lot. Not by a directional push, but by offering new ways to connect. And just like Olivier said.
You used some keywords there, like fun. You had fun doing there. We were connected. So definitely this is also part of, I mean, again, just taking that example because it's a strong and quite well-known one. If you talk to people during the Friday for Future demonstrations, they were connected, they were committed, there was emotion. So it's definitely something that is an important factor into these aspects more than more traditional communication. Emotion is a very, very strong asset in communication.
Having fun, creating emotions, are those core principles you would define, Olivier, in creating an effective serious games to be sure that the serious games you're gonna create is gonna be effective for social change?
Yeah, I think if everything should be through the emotional spectrum. We see that in election. We see that democracy is evolving to extreme, and this is not because the people are not interested in politics. They are, but they are more in an irrational way. That's what it's always difficult in games, and what we try to convey is the rationality of the content with the game's rules, objectives, what you need to compel us to level up, to win, etc. And also to develop the emotional attachment and to make people involved. And if they are involved and they want to play, they want to learn also, they want to get better, to level up. And that's why we try to have these two words all together, the rational words and the emotional part.
And is this also, Gerard, what you take into account when building a game, when you know you want to build a game to provoke emotions and to...
The challenge is usually to sort of overwhelm people with a complete experience, but to plant somehow an assumption or an image into their head, and then generate the desire to realize that image, and then the interaction will flow from that. So if people have a sense of where they're going, but if they're in a team, like for example the four of us at the table, and we're not sure whether we have the same image in our head, it will immediately in a small group provoke a good conversation. Because if everybody runs off in every direction, it's like my hands, it doesn't work. And if you somehow connect and you just make sure, okay, we can take a few steps together, then you're already actively doing it. And the game is especially inviting for that. And if you have a shared success at the game table, you will be able to take that success with you into society or the organization where you're working.
So at Mindgame, for example, do you measure the impact, the results of a game by the interactions that it implemented, that it created?
Yeah, well, if we have a game in a big room with 400 people, we do that. You can easily see it. You can film it, but you don't need that much data. You can just see if people engaged and how much they engaged. But if you have an online game, it's a little bit harder. But still, there you can also have ways to find out if people actually took the emotion and the movement out of the game into reality. But that depends a little bit on the project.
Before creating the game, to make sure it would have an impact, what were the scope and the objective of this game when you started developing it?
So there are two different games in the European Parliament. One, we call it the physical role-play game. Why? Because it's a bit similar to an escape game. You go into a physical space and it happens there. So you have a mock-up chamber, mock-up comedy rooms, and this was all built in 2011. Before I was actually part of the project, but already back then the institutions were exploring how to diversify the communication approach to get closer to people and to get a bit away from the top-down principles, but try to go more into teaching democracy rather than teaching. This is also important to communicate, of course, the decisions of the parliament, what it does, but if you don't have a initial interest and understanding of democracy, this is not going to go very, very far in terms of acknowledging what's going on around. So this was really the first block to try to go with younger people and give them the necessary tools to understand the democratic society in which you were evolving in Europe. And the process back then, so it was actually reflecting what already existed in other places. There was a similar Center for Visitors in the US. There were similar role-play games in Norway, for example. Then the Nordic countries have already been more at the forefront and have been using this tool as an educational tool, serious games, for a very long time. So we made sure to surround ourselves with experts who had the proper knowledge how these things were done, with solutions that have already been used, tested, and proven effective before. There was also a will to make sure that we engage people. So the topics that were chosen for the scenarios that would be going through were topics that would actually be relatable, palatable for young people, and also in line with their areas of interest but concern, while also covering what we think are areas of concern and interest for the European society in general. So the current version of the game is based on two approaches of legislation. One is about the water solidarity, how water has to be put as a good that is available to everyone and supported. And the other one is about security through identification chips implanted. So it's about privacy, it's about a lot of different topics. We also made sure to pick topics that could be potentially controversial and spark discussion because of emotion and connection and engagement. So that was a very clear cue for us to follow. And now that we're redesigning the new content, we're basically following the similar approach. We're still working with experts in the field. We are also picking from not only Parliament priorities, but Eurobarometer that show what is the most engaging topic for citizens. And we are also working on having a game that will be equally controversial to kind of spark a debate and make sure that people can confront ideas in a healthy way, but still that it's not flat. Otherwise, you don't really go to the goal of showing this need for compromise and debate and negotiation. So these were very important elements to really show, this is like real life. This is not a real case scenario, but it could very well be. And the processes at stake there are the same than in real life.
Olivier, maybe how do you, Céline said it, there was this real educational goal behind in the scope of the two games, but at Game in Society, how do you balance educational goal with user engagement in your definition, in your development of the games?
Yeah, the first step is, we call it the simulation, the light simulation design, saying, okay, we want to mimic the core things as a debate or parliamentary process, etc., or it can be a training on a machine, whatever. So let's say the very dry and articulable content, and then after that we try to see, okay, here is the mechanics, but how to add some game mechanics to make it like more a game than just a simulation. And this is all very interesting because simulation is about mimicking reality in a cold way and thinking people, okay, they accept that simulation and we are okay to practice because they are really into that. They want to fly, to drive train, whatever. So, okay, they need to practice. But if you don't want to practice, if you don't care, you need to have something else to make people into that. And so that's where the game part is there, and it's not about only saying, hey, it's a game, it's try to convey desire through aesthetics, something that very looks like video games, like the standards of the game industry, through also the promise that should be, okay, have fun, it can be nice, and you are not just there to learn, it's you want to do something, you will have fun, and then you will learn. This is the second step, and I think it's very interesting because it's a mix between, as I say, rationalization of a content plus putting some emotion in it. And the emotional part is also freedom. So that's why it's obviously something difficult. When are you going to play that game? Where, etc. With who? Who is very important, the communicative and the communication and the community you are trying to build with a game or within a game. So we try to make this equation between all of these.
And is this what you took into account when developing Fortnite Europe's Race to Democracy? Maybe you can tell us a bit more about this project?
Yeah, this project was, and the first thing was the issue. The issue we wanted to fight was abstention, saying that it's very crazy that people under 35 don't vote for us. It was not okay because democracy is for them and for young generation is for them. We are building that for them and say, okay, how to try to get them back. And that's why the first thing. And we say, okay, it's not about promoting democracy because democracy, they know, they care, they don't care, it's just there. It was more about Europe, why Europe is important for them, and was it? And first step, we say, okay, maybe they don't know about Europe, just they don't know it exists. So it was the first step to say, hey, we are here. We are doing things, Europe here is there, it could be nice, it could be cool, it could be where you are. It means we wanted them to, wanted that game to get to the gamers and not to make the people come to Europe. It was Europe going to them. And that was super interesting because we didn't put serious content in it. It was just the first step, saying, okay, Europe is there, it's for you, play it, have fun with that game, and start this cool and nice connection with Europe. It was the first step we wanted to do. And I think this approach is important because if you want people to get involved, but they need to know you and to know you in a positive way.
So for the people who didn't have the chance to see or to play with that game, can you explain a bit how was it? So you entered the game, how was it?
Yeah, it's a race game on Fortnite. So it's a rocket racing game where you are going to have a race with other people and trying to make the best score around the a stage, which is a version of Europe with thematics like ecology, like industry, with the parliament at the center. So you have fun on this environment. Point, you've got, okay, some reminder that you've got some election, and so go to vote. But we didn't put any messages, we didn't want people to convince them to vote anything, we just want them to get involved in the elections. And so what we wanted also to do was to use that tool to make some social communication through the games, saying, okay, the best thing would have been to have some candidate playing that games and discuss around that. It was difficult in the timing, etc., to make it, but it should be super interesting to use a game to make people discuss, as streamers does in the industry. They use game to talk. So it was the core idea.
So it must ring a bell to you, Céline, in the fact of promoting, bringing interest to democracy. That's kind of where I think both of the games you were talking about join each other, right?
Yeah, indeed. It's really not about hammering one specific message. So it's not like the game as a moral in the end, saying, and now you know that you should do that. This is really not about shoulds, and it's more about this is your playground, and why not go and have a look around it? And it could be. There is always this idea that is spread in many layers of the population and also young people that Europe is not for me, it's far away from me. I have no say in it, I cannot change anything, and my voice doesn't matter. And it's just the first step to tell them, okay, so this is how things work, and your voice could matter. It's just you to decide if you want it and where, at what level. There are many options, and we understand why you think it's difficult, but actually we're there to help you feel less intimidated and to have it less daunting. It's about like a kind of a demystification of Europe that's been built over many years for many different reasons as something, far away and difficult. And it's really to show them, yeah, the rules look difficult, but the concept in itself is something that is actually part of your life, whether you like it or not. And now it's up to you to decide what role you want to play in this environment that is yours. The playground is there, the swings are there, the sand is there, and you have to walk in it. You decide if you want to stop on the slide or not, but this is your environment no matter what.
And Europe seems to understand that now. Serious games helped in this demystification of Europe in general, because recently they published in October their first comprehensive overview of the European video game sector, highlighting the significance of gaming as a communication tool. You said it, serious games are a very strong pillar to communicate. So do you think, it's a very wide question, but do you think it will help Europe do more initiatives around serious games to communicate more to young Europeans? Do you see this framework evolving in Europe, this framework of building new games?
But what I can tell you is that the games in the Parliament are there to stay. We are actually developing new content. So I said before, we have a physical version of the game, but when the corona pandemic appeared, we also thought about solutions to still keep this connection with citizens, and we developed a online version that you can play from basically anywhere, from your school, from your community center, anywhere. And we're actually developing new content, both for the physical role-play game and for the online role-play game, so to kind of give a replayability effect, to also, cover more topics catering to the interest or to the learning goals of the teachers who would be interested. So this is definitely something we are building on. There are also more initiatives. First, inside the Parliament, there are experiences developed around the Oculus to have this kind of virtual reality approach. This is also being built up. There are initiatives in other European institutions. The European Commission developed a role-play game. The Council developed one. They developed also some kind of model European Union. So this is definitely something that is growing for sure. I cannot tell you exactly where it's going to stop, but the idea is to have an arsenal of tools to be able to cater the needs of everybody and not let people behind, not only focus on people who have the interest and the capacity, the tools to decode press releases and more dry communication, but to really make sure that we can be there for everybody and try to take everybody by the hand and bring them together.
And bringing them together, I guess it means also, as you said, creating connections, creating emotions. So if we go right down in the role of emotions, you all talked a bit about emotions, but Gerard, you said in our previous conversation outside of this studio that gamification engages the mind in a way like it needs to be engaged playfully, and it needs to place the player at the helm of the game by seducing him. Is this your vision, how you see serious games, emotional engagement in serious games?
It breaks down into a lot of different steps, but I think we discussed a little bit on the threshold. So to lower the threshold, you have to somehow catch a person. So, for example, for European democracy, it could be that you catch people at a local level. In Holland, for example, there's a long-standing tradition of solving water problems collectively. So if you explain it that way, Dutch people are very pro-Europe. Because we realize if the dike breaks over there, we still get wet feet. So we need to somehow work together to do this. And if you take that as a starting point, people are really willing to engage with the subject on a pretty deep level. But if you say, but Europe is important and it's in Brussels and we need to explain to you how the procedures work, then they switch off. So somehow you have to get across the threshold. And you do that by finding an emotion inside somebody, not by pushing a new emotion on them. In your case, I think playing Fortnite is very powerful. It's a very emotional game format. People, young boys who play it, are screaming at each other and they're dancing up and down. And so you have the emotion already there. And if you find an engaging gaming format in there, and it definitely draws people's attention to the subject. And in your case, when you said we want to use the Oculus Rift, everybody wants to do that, of course, but somehow the gameplay to connect within the Oculus Rift bubble has not been developed well enough to produce a lot of successful spin-off. So it's a great technology, people like to put it on once or twice, but until they discover a way to really connect within the Oculus Rift world, I think it's not going to be a successful game platform. So maybe that's going to take half a generation for people to grow up and get used to meeting other people inside of an experience like that. And we expect miracles, and we think if we put the glasses on people's head, then they immediately start getting excited, but it's not the case. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Céline, I saw you nodding and smiling.
But I was thinking, you're right. Communication is sometimes a bit of a gamble. I remember when I started my career in the institution, the European Parliament had a page on MySpace. You had to be there back then. Yeah. We also started 2 years later on Facebook. It was a gamble. Then today the Facebook presence is extremely relevant. The MySpace one has kind of disappeared somewhere in the well deep down. What will happen with the Oculus presence? It's just, as I said, an arsenal of tools. Exploration, trying to go where people are. I think I'm thinking of this example because you mentioned earlier talking about politicians. In the US, for example, there was this, Ocasio-Cortez, the Latin origin member of the chamber who was campaigning for elections, and she was on was it Among Us? There was also
Ocasio-Cortez was on Among Us.
And that game was all the rage. I think it's a bit less today, but does it mean it was not relevant to be there back then? I'm not sure. I think it has its purpose. I think communications is also about sensing where it's time to go somewhere, when it's time to stay, when it's time to switch, when it's time to complement. So I cannot say what will happen with the Oculus, and I'm sure in 5 years' time there will be tools that we don't even envisage today. I think all communities deserve to be explored and then to see what is worth
I think what you said earlier is the same, basically. So you go to where the people are, not the other way around. You don't try to...
Exactly.
And it's interesting to think about that in terms of spaces, because when you produce games, you produce spaces with framework, with rules, content, but it's very emerging. And successful games are where people are really into that, manipulating it, maybe changing the whole goal, but reappropriating, and it's a tool for them. And that's why it's super difficult sometimes to convince people to make communication through games at 100%, because communication is very controlled, top-down, and linear. Linear, as you say, and you are going to produce some space for people to have fun together and create a community. It's almost orthogonal, but it's what works. And that's very difficult to make people accept it. But when you look at social medias, it's a community where people are together, exchange a point of view, have fun with this social space. And games should be designed as social spaces also. And when you're an institution and try to promote that, to give it to them, you need to consider that they could make things you don't want them to do. And that's okay. But not always easy to make people understand that.
Gerard, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, because you asked about seduction, and I think that's where a lot of the seduction is. It's a curiosity. So once you enter a space, and as soon as you engender a curiosity in the player or about what they could create there, then you have a great first step. Unfortunately, as we have seen in many Lego games, etc., people immediately start building huge penises, and that's not what you want. But if the tool is good, it will create much beyond it. If you go onto, for example, for Minecraft, onto YouTube, and you see what people have built, it's just amazing. And it's because you created the space where people are curious about what more they can create. And we shouldn't be completely pushed away by people abusing the space a little bit, even with foul language or with obscenities. Usually, if the community is healthy, that will not be the dominant outcome of the interaction. In Fortnite, they had their issues with that too.
But it seems that Fortnite's Europe's race to democracy was also a success because it seduced the people, because Fortnite was already known, so people were knowing what they were doing. So was seduction the emotion you were really targeting when building the game?
Yeah, seduction, of course, and seduction because thanks to Fortnite, and if going to technical stuff, you got UEFN, which is your Unreal Engine for Fortnite, which is a tool that makes you able to develop Fortnite experiences. So you can use the technology of Fortnite, you put some fancy graphics, and so at the end it looks like a Fortnite production. And this is super important because if you want to talk to people, you need to make content that looks like what they'd like. If not, if it seems bad, they say, oh, I don't like that stuff. So first step. And then also what's interesting with this kind of games is that you've got this community and people that are playing, they can jump into that easily. And that's what we wanted to catch also, was the fact that these games are new games as a service. Fortnite says is a new metaverse. And the Epic Foundation is there to promote that, to make the YouTube of gaming, etc. through Fortnite. And they use that and they try to promote some experiences, some content. And it's very this approach where lots of people are making content also. And this is the philosophy of the tool and the platform. And it was the philosophy of Steam also, or the Source Engine with Half-Life. And when you give tools to people are producing stuff very interesting, sometimes, as you say, not relevant, but sometimes very, very interesting. And so that's why we wanted to use Fortnite, because it was also a well-known IP, intellectual property. And the world of entertainment is very dominated by big IPs, so how to exist in this world. Sometimes is to make some approach with them and try to develop them in with the way you want to use that tool also.
So this space that you created was really appealing and was really indeed well known because Fortnite was well known before. But do you think if you have played the other way around, if you had created a game where people would have feel fear maybe and be like, okay, now I realize that if I don't vote, this is gonna happen. Do you think fear could have been also an emotion that would have made this game a success and bring interest?
Fear is a trigger. I think it's an emotional trigger, very strong. We are living in this during the French campaign. It's about fear, and it's a trigger for everybody with the sense of loss also, which is very game-like, because when you fear to lose something, you're very affected, etc. Some of these mechanics. But okay, express fear. But the first thing is, would people go into that game? And that's why it's very also difficult. You can make a very powerful game, but if people don't get there, it's not relevant. So how to make people get there? First, maybe to provide something cool. And maybe next step is, once you've got a community of people that trust what you do, that trust your games, that trust that, okay, you're an IP, and let's say EU is a good creator of games, so the next episode will be a fear game, okay. And let's do that because we know it's good. Like, I don't know, Electronica, Ubisoft, or Activision, whatever. People buy that game because they know it's quality game. So there is this strategy also to build that. And yeah, fear games should be very, very powerful, as fear is powerful in society.
But maybe not as a first step.
Well, I think if you look at, I'm a biologist.
But do you have example at Mindgame maybe of games you developed where fear was?
Yes,
where
absolutely.
fear was triggered.
We made a game after the financial crash in 2009. There was a huge effort made at the national regulators level, and they wrote a new book of basically of how to regulate the financial industry. And the book was not read by anybody. They just didn't get it off the shelf, and the reason was because they were afraid. And why were they afraid? Because the National Bank has two responsibilities. One is to make sure the system doesn't collapse, but the other one is also that financial institutions are able to do their work. And if you suffocate the work they want to do, you will be blamed as the National Bank. So there were terrified about suffocating the system. And then in a game, we help them learn to engage and to be critical and to ask questions without fearing to suffocate them. And because they did it in a game, they took that experience to real life, and after that, everybody started using the book. And they didn't get that message across without a game. So you have to learn to overcome your mortal fear of being the one who is spoiling the party. And I think in any regulatory context, that's extremely important, because as a regulator, you're not just in opposition of the people you regulate, but you're also in the same business together. Mm-hmm. And so if you ever end up at a position of fear in real life, you have to overcome it, and there's no better place to do it than in a game.
And I would also want to add, does the end justify the means? On an institution's perspective, should we just dangle fear in front of people, to even if it's a powerful trigger, to achieve possible goals, just such as mobilizing people? I think that is my personal opinion, that in a democracy, the role of institution is never to terrorize people, because then you're not in a democracy anymore. If you think, I will not name any names, but if you think in countries in the world where the institutions, that the government in general is terrorizing the population, is usually not a democracy.
No,
Even if it's a powerful trigger, is it somewhere we should go?
I think the integrity as a media producer, doesn't matter of which kind. You want to address a fear that's actually already there and not invent a bigger fear in order to get your way. I mean, that's the difference between being a tyrant and a democratic society.
And also, if you look at other things like climate change, or the GIEC, or other groups try to make people conscious that global warming is there by fear, it doesn't work so much well. And because they are fighting against desire and pleasure. And sometimes the pleasure to drive big cars or whatever is stronger than the fear to lose things. So how to compete? Is it to make fear people afraid of that? We see that it doesn't really works, or to make them willing to change, willing to be better, to level up. And in democracy, I think it's one of the core things, as you say, Céline, is not about managing by fear, but managing by discussion, rationality, and sometimes common goal, not to lose, but to reach. And that's difficult to develop, but we need also to keep it in mind when you make games. It's about common thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say that rather than trying to find what is the strongest fear trigger, we should find how to best re-enchant finally democracy in Europe, and how to make wonder again in the eyes of people. I think it would be much stronger if you think of your life. I think it's a matter of personality, and you as a biologist can explain better, but I usually have stronger memories of the good times, and the difficult times tend to fade away. So it's also maybe fear is a powerful immediate trigger, but if you want to create a long-lasting experience that people want to take with them, probably building out something positive is going to be stronger.
But if you want to make a connection with a person and you're dismissing what fear they have, we're not talking about making them more afraid, but you're about looking eye to eye with the fear they might possibly have. I think that's a more genuine way of communicating than to just focus on the ambition. The ambition is great, but you have to have the feeling that you're a band of brothers and that can also address possible fears. And if you're in a game and you're going into a terrible dungeon with a dragon inside, there's fear. Because if only the fear of missing out on the great finale. I mean, if you're the first one to die, you won't see the dragon pass away. So there's fear there, and if you feel secure in your group, you can have the ambition. But I don't think they're two separate worlds that you can. I have one and not have the other. I think they're one package, and that's what you have to address if you're making a game.
Yeah, it's about finding solutions together rather than being paralyzed by the fear.
Yeah, paralyzation is the worst.
Céline, could we say that gamification equals to, so going more into the communication aspect of the serious games, could we say that gamification equals to simplification and therefore make it a good communication tool in general using serious games?
Communication is simplification. Communication is simplification and repetition. So I think this principle applies to every communication action. Otherwise, you're not in communication. You may be in teaching something very specific and technical. But if you want to communicate an idea, you have to simplify. And it's the same in our case. For example, our game, if it's the virtual game, it's more or less an hour and a half. If it's the physical version of the game, it's 2 hours. And we are taking the players through the legislative procedure. That normally lasts around 12 months. So you have to simplify. And I think simplification is also very powerful to make you sit and think, what is the essence of what I'm trying to communicate? What is the most important? Do I want these people to become lawyers and be able to, recitate all the different steps in detail of the process? Or do I want them to get the spirit behind? So I think simplification in games, but not only, is really powerful to oblige you to sit and think about what is the main objectives and the main message you want to convey.
I would like to jump into that because I do think that democracy in Europe is like art museum. It's not for us. It's just for the elite. And whatever you do in politics, cultural policies, it's difficult to get people in. And we made this example with the Centre Pompidou, and we also with our museum that we put with a video game online to get where people were there. And we go further with them because we went to the Paris Games Week, which was a big event for gamers, and it was super interesting because we were in the gamer world, but the Centre Pompidou was there, and people were, oh, you're right, this is this building, okay, it's cool, okay, next time I go in.
Yeah.
And politics, and it's always about how I authorize myself to think first. And when you go to sociology and electoral sociology, you see that most of people, popular classes, they say, no, I don't have the competency to talk about politics. But yes, I've got. So you need first to consider that, to give them the possibility to vote, to discuss, to disagree, or whatever, but just to participate. And that's why gaming also is interesting, or gamification, because it's going where people are also, and to give them the possibility to do stuff and to manipulate. And so it was a game where you discover the modern art with color, system, etc. And you are like artists making the process, the whole process to making art. And so, okay, they're doing like me in the game. So it was funny to reverse the approach and say, okay, the client blue is okay, like I do in the game. So it's more as always, connecting people and getting to them.
So people were coming to the Centre Pompidou to play the game, right?
No, it was online. It was on
online.
Steam. It was on all the devices. It was where gamers were. It was on their places. That was interesting, and make them going to the Centre Pompidou. It was not a location-based game. It was a communication tool, mediation tool also.
And what was the result? Was the result opening, as we said, like critical thinking, more critical thinking about art, or?
Yeah, critical thinking, and also it was super interesting to see the debate in the gamer world saying, oh no, this is modern art, this is not for us, oh, this is a game by a modern institution, they're going to be bad, oh, this is all the cliche. So it was super interesting to dig them and to talk to them, to address them first, and then to make people play, say, okay, it's cool, it's nice, okay, it's a nice game. And also the people from the art world, they discover games and say, oh, games can be interesting also. So everybody was discovering in each part that art or game could be for them. So it was the first thing. After that, also people going to the museum as a way to discover it, and also a tool for education, for high schools to teach art, but also physics, whatever. They use the game as a tool for many things.
And if you think of role-play games, it's probably the oldest game that we all played as humans. Like everybody as a kid played the cowboy and the Indians. We have it in us, and nobody said, I cannot be a cowboy because I don't know how to ride a horse, and there was no this questioning. So I think going back to these fundamentals, we are all capable of it, and not putting the bar super high in the threshold. The entry level is just everybody. You're a person, be welcome.
But we said it. All those games and all those ways are real tools and interesting tools to get more, to communicate more, to get more into different issues. But going more on that, like going more deeper into the subject of communication, we're confronted today to many communications, many informations, to the point that now we're talking about disinformation. We're confronted to fake news, to a lot of things that we don't know if we can believe them or not. And I was wondering, does Game in Society, Olivier, tackle disinformation?
Yeah, we made two games. One for Media Education Association, which is teaching how to analyze fake news from let's say semiology to analysis of bias, etc. So very analytics, and give people the key to say, oh, this is not a good message. This is something that is tricky. Oh, yeah, because there is no author, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you teach them in class. And also we make these more general games where you are producing fake news. And we say, okay, everybody is trying to fight against fake news. But one of the core things is that fake news is producing fictions. It's cool. The thing is, people like it because it's fun. It's like fiction. It's like TV shows, etc.
Game fight.
Yeah, you know. So you can't fight in a rational way. You fight it in the emotional way. So we made this game, Fake Ink, where you are trying to manipulate a stage, and you are making photos. Say, hey, I'm producing a fake news. So you are trying to make the stage of people never been on the moon or aliens on the moon, and so you are setting it like this, etc. With trying to think, oh, it could be the best fake news shot. And it was a fun way. And then after I say, okay, you know, you have fun because you have fun watching fake news, you have fun making them, talking to that. So this is not news, this is fiction. And that was our core goal and core message. So it was another way to think about all that. About, I think today, rationality is very, very, very fight. And so we need to go to over level to try to get back some rational stuff, but through over emotion or through fun and pleasure. So that's what
so you put yourself in the place of someone building fake news.
Yeah.
So then you understand why there is this desire to
this desire, and it's also fun because okay, let's make this shot like that tag. Okay, I put it on the virtual internet we created, and it's a way to understand that it's an economy, an industry, and it's not just making fun or fake things, it's also a business. So it was a way to understand all that also.
I see you very enthusiastic, Gerard, by this nation of
I think if I take it one step further, what you said, fake news is an entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And it is, because it draws a huge amount of attention, and that's because of the palatability of the stories it produces. And that was always the case. So the guy in the bar who's telling the tallest tale about a bear in the woods would get much more attention and laughs than the other guy who was telling about the weather, because that was also really going on outside. So there's a way to engage with fake news rationally, and that is only so what you think you know about the world, does this help you predict better what's going to happen tomorrow? And if that's the case, you're not dealing with fake news, you're dealing with relevant information. So if you somehow have the conspiracy in your head that the government is trying to cheat you, and the next day you encounter something where the government is actually cheating you out of something, you are not dealing with fake news, you are dealing with real news on a level, because you're teaching you to be suspicious about what government has planned for you. So if you have a society where government regularly tricks you, or you feel tricked because your agency is exaggerated, for example, you think you have influence, but they tell you have influence, but you don't. And then if something confirms this, you tend to believe that story. And it's not irrational, it's a very rational process. And if you create an ecosystem where people, for example, learn how to bullshit, like you did, that's why I got so enthusiastic. I think it's great, because if you learn to bullshit, you also learn to acknowledge other people's bullshit. And I think as a young kid, when my dad took me after church to a bar, and there was a guy telling tall tales, he would sort of set me on the trail of recognizing the bullshit. He said, you can enjoy the stories, but he never saw a bear in the woods. It's a crazy story. And so somehow you have to learn it. And now we learn it online. So it's a very different world, and you learn it from your friends, but you also have to learn it online. Otherwise, you're falling for the bear story every time, and it's not going to help you make good predictions about the future. So my kids are mid-20s. I really spend a lot of time with them figuring that out. So when are you being taken for a ride, and when are you learning something that will help you make good decisions? And that's the critical thinking, I think.
And then also what's interesting, as you say, Gerard, is it's an entertainment industry plus a community content-based creation by people. everybody can produce fake things. So you're part of the industry.
Yeah.
There's this
So low
there's
threshold.
the community, and that's why in communication it's very tricky when you think about classical communication. It's today is producing communities. If you don't produce a community of people engaged, you don't have a communication really. It's okay, it's messages, people get paid to make that, but what's the effect? The effect is that we are a community of people making things, believing or not. Maybe they don't believe, it's just fun to make this fake thing, but they share it, and there is this social media that is amplifying the content, and at the end, okay, and first we need to come back to basics, what is reality, what is fiction. In the game industry, people were fearing people would play and say, oh, they're killing people in video games, so they're going to kill them in the street. No, because the society tells them, no, it's fiction, and everybody knows it's fiction. It's except people suffering some difficulties or disease. But the truth is the same in the fake news, where you should learn that it's fiction, it's not reality. And to come back to that, it's when you produce community, and what's super interesting in politics is how to turn that into people engaged in the civil society or in politics. Can a base of people dealing with fake news be electors? The truth is yes today. And that's why it's super difficult for classical institutions to understand. But why do we have candidates that believe all this conspiracy and talk about that on social media, and they are there for the deputation? Say, wow, okay, come on, but they've got this fan base, and it's super tricky for the democracy to accept that and to get into that as a classical institution. If you don't, you leave the whole space to all these people and all this rationality, because we're very rational. We're very right in fiction, fun fiction, and with levels of fiction also, and it's very, very new spaces to get in.
As a member of the European Parliament, Céline, do you think, to your point of view, that European institutions in general would be willing to use that type of games, for example, to educate the public about disinformation, for example?
I think there are many layers. I would like first to kind of put my perspective on what you said, and then I will happily answer this question. I'm a bit less enthusiastic than you. The problem is the instrumentalization of fake news that is more often than not in the European scene actually used by foreign interference for very sad means. It had already had very adverse effects. I mean, everybody can still remember Brexit, and there are studies proving that disinformation play a huge role in the outcome. So it's actually depriving people of their right to use their own opinion by rigging it in a way for outcomes that are actually used by actors outside of Europe with goals to undermine democracy. So it's actually really concerning. I think institutions are actually very well aware. And it's not about not going into that, but I think it's a recent phenomenon, because until 20, 30 years ago, news were given by one source, the official news from newspapers and TV and so on. And that source could be plural because you have different political opinions behind, but this source were always verified and trustworthy to some extent. With the multiplication of other media, you have all kinds of source now, and people have never been prepared. So it's great that you do that job with your children. I think it's extremely important. But what about everybody else whose parents don't have the capacities or the will to engage in that, and schools are not prepped? So I think there is a real responsibility there, also for the institution, to help young people make their own mind and be critical and recognize fake news. And in the case of the institution, we want to do it in a way that shows that we hear and we understand how important that is. So there are more traditional ways. I have colleagues that are actually putting together strategies to raise awareness of citizens on this. But we also are indeed thinking about putting it in the next version of the game. So both for the physical and the online version, the scenarios, there will be elements based on disinformation. And actually, this is one of the new scenarios we're preparing, is around disinformation. Because we see it as a real threat, not for, because people sometimes say, yeah, it's because it's threatening you as an institution. No, it's because it's threatening democracy, and it's threatening people, and it's leading them to ways that are actually harming them on the long run. So, yeah, we are definitely making it as one of the priorities for the next version.
It doesn't seem like we're too far apart because, for example, we just walked through a park and say there's a story that there's a bear in there and it eats people. That's terrible. So you don't want to go into the park. But that's not actually true. There's not actually a bear. So you need, if you're a young person, you need somebody to tell you, that's just a story. There's not really a bear. But what you really need is to go out into the park and experience that there's not a bear there. You have to look under the bed and see that there's no monster there. Otherwise, it doesn't go away. And so dealing with the misinformation should be 90% of the story, and trying to suppress it and deny it is important. But I don't think it can ever be more than 10% of your approach. Because if you don't train the people, and it's a huge job.
Yeah,
it's huge. I know, because my 2 kids, that was a huge job. And somehow they're very happy young adults now. So I'm glad it worked out that way. But 90% effort goes there and 10% effort.
I fully agree with you. I think trying to suppress this information is actually reinforcing it. So
yeah,
I also don't think
giving
it's
it
the
a
way to
mythical
go.
status in some cases.
I think the way to go is indeed by giving people the tools to themselves discern when something is disinformation. And it's a big job. And as I said before, so that's something that kind of rose from one day to the other, and society didn't really prepare itself in
we're
having the
lagging
tools
behind.
to teach people. So that's where we have to intervene, for sure.
Yeah, but I would like to add, because this is a very important subject, because this is geopolitics and this is soft power, and this is soft power. If you consider fake news as communication, I think you're wrong. This is about entertainment, and the people that are making that are people very strong in entertainment, used by politics, of course, but they're using the entertainment code, not the communication one. And you can make communication crisis management on fake news, no? You need to fight entertainment by entertainment. If you don't, of course, you need to teach people to understand, to analyze, to debunk, of course. But the thing is, as you say, your stories, it triggers something in you, and okay, you can post-rationalize it, but the truth is, it triggers some things, and we are people, we are human beings, we want to have the possibility, either an alternative or something else, something we don't understand. And that's why fake news are very, very, very powerful and very strong, because they are like the tales from the Grimm brothers. It's the same mechanism, and it's used in a political propaganda way. And so you need to consider that and to fight with the same also tools, educate plus counter it. Not defense, but also say, be present, talk about that, and make it like it is, just to isolate it as a fake entertainer, cool thing, to consider it as it is, really, consider it. And then after that, you can fight it with the good tools, I think.
Well, you all agreed on that. The serious games are very powerful tools for communication, powerful tool for putting yourself in the place of the person you're trying to understand. So unfortunately, we reached the end of our webinar. So I would like to thank you all of you for your participation to this webinar, and to you for watching us. Stay tuned for the next episode, and I hope you had a playful moment with us today. Thank you very much.